What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, friends, and welcome to this week's Spooky. I was not going to say that. That's so dad jokey. I am, of course, Henry Couto, your host and narrator for this little taste of macabre that you need in the middle of your week. It's what growing bodies need, my friends. So tonight's story is very exciting because it's written by a guy named John Oak Dalton. John is someone I work with a lot on my day job making movies, and John is an incredibly prolific writer, both of screen and now he's been getting into prose, and I think his story is really fun and really scary. And my friends, it is the debut of an episode where we have a Weekly Spooky original. So this story is debuting right here on Weekly Spooky. It was written for Weekly Spooky, and if I say Weekly Spooky 4 more times, I get $1. No, but I'm pretty excited about it. I think that alone is enough preface to get you excited. It's got me excited. I'm really excited to showcase some great writers' work right here on the show, of course, from already published items as well as the occasional original. So we're going to get to it right now, and as always, after the story, if you want to hang out, we'll talk a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit more about John and I's work. We'll talk a little bit more about what's going on in my life, because as you're listening to this, I am on the road probably to Georgia, to Athens, Georgia, to do a little film festival, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'll be talking about it after the story, but we have to get the most important thing out of the way first, and that, of course, is the spooky. So here we go, friends. Let's get the story going. I Saw the Dragon by John Oak Dalton, a Weekly Spooky original. When I left Desert Storm in 91, all I'd done was run Saddam back in his rat hole. We let him off just like my grandpa told me they did to the Nazis back in World War II, when he drove a tank right up to Berlin and then had to sit there and wait for the Russians to come and trash the place. That was us in 1991. Got up to Baghdad and pulled the parking brake and sat there. So when my buddy Chisholm started talking about being a soldier of fortune afterwards, just like in the magazines, I was bored enough to try it. We thought we'd be like Crockett and Tubbs, only with less Phil Collins. We signed up with this for-hire outfit, and the first place we mustered out to was this African country that doesn't even exist anymore. It was run by the government, and then the rebels, and then the government, and if they were sitting on oil, or had anything anybody else wanted, it wouldn't have gone on like it did. The only thing they were exporting were refugees, only most of them got shot down at the border, so there weren't even that many of them. So the government had this Russian Mi-46 copter, and they dropped us in a hot LZ at the top of a big hill where the country's only television station was. Man, we came in on that thing Ride of the Valkyries style, with just that one big red light at the top of that tower blinking at us. That big red eye looking right at us. We were supposed to secure it to keep it out of rebel hands, only when the 3 of us got there, about a half dozen rebels were hunkered down inside. We couldn't just frag or burn the place, so we shot it out with those guys. That was because when it was all over, the president of this country wanted to come up there and make a big speech over the TV to the whole country. He was that kind of guy. Chisholm got it right through the eye, so that was the end of that adventure. It wasn't like he had read about in those magazines. The other guy, whose name I forget, got shot in the leg. And it wouldn't have been so bad, but we didn't even have a piece of masking tape to put over that wound. We weren't ready for any resistance or much of anything. It was a half-assed thing we did, really. Eventually, They got bold and kept poking their heads out farther and farther, and finally we got lucky and shot 2 of them. Then the rest of them ran out the back door, down the hill, and I stormed in the front door by myself because the other dude had already died too. Bled straight out, and it shouldn't have happened. There wasn't anybody to lay down any covering fire so I could go chase the SOBs that killed my buddy Chisholm. No revenge for me. Again, it's not like in the magazines. Inside wasn't much. There was a lobby with a couple of folding chairs, and then a studio about the size of a hotel room, and a room where all the machinery was. VCRs and stuff, all wired together. They still had their lunch set out in the lobby and a coffee pot on, and that came in damn handy real quick. I secured the area and waited for reinforcements. It was kind of funny. They had just loaded up all the VCR machines with movies, and they were running nonstop on that one TV channel. All the boxes looked like somebody walked out of a Blockbuster Video back in the States and was racking up some hellacious fines. It was illegal looking as hell, but I guess running movies all day made the average person think the government was going to be okay. No need to panic, kind of thing. I guessed it wasn't going to turn out that way after all. I was up there a couple of days and nobody ever came up that hill. I sure learned a lot about those movies, though. Saw them over and over. At noon, played The Gods Must Be Crazy. Then at 2 p.m. was Love Brewed in the African Pot. And those were kind of boring. Then at 4 p.m. it kicked into high gear and they showed Shaft in Africa. Then at 6 p.m. they showed Savage Sisters. At 8 p.m., Black Mama, White Mama. Then at 10 p.m. was Blood Fist. And I love Don the Dragon Wilson, so I always watched that. Then at midnight was The Gods Must Be Crazy again, and it started all over. Y'all can have Bruce Lee or Chuck Norris or whoever. The Dragon had a legit fighting career of his own and made more movies too. And I have too much respect for those guys to try to guess who would win in a fight. It's stupid anyway because you would need 3 time machines to make it all work out, and that's never going to happen. Just watch the first Blood Fist movie. But after a couple of days of these movies playing over and over, I got pretty bored. So I looked all around the studio to see what there was to see. I'm pretty sure now what I thought was a big oil stain on the concrete floor of that studio was actually an old blood stain. In fact, I'm very sure of it. But what I was paying attention to at the time was this little hatch I saw on the floor. I opened it, and a ladder made out of what looked like scrap wood kind of leaned against the frame and was gone into the dark. I unsnapped a flashlight from my belt and thumbed it to life, shined it around down there. I saw that this ladder went down into a basement, actually more like a root cellar with dirt walls and everything. And there was a bunch of movies on shelves down there and a TV on a card table with its own little VCR. Of course, there were rats scurrying around everywhere, but they'd never bothered me that much. Dumb, I guess. I was hoping that's where they kept the booze, or maybe the dope, or hell, even some fresh vegetables like my grandma stored in her root cellar back in Indiana, way back in the day. Since none of that good stuff I was hoping for was down there, I decided maybe it's time to change up the programming. Maybe people out there hiding in their houses waiting for it to be over were sick of watching the same 5 or 6 movies too. Only when I started kind of ducking my head down there and looking at those shelves, these tapes all had handwritten labels, so I didn't know what was what. But like I said, bored. So I took one and I popped it in. At first I just thought it was a straight up torture video that maybe the government had made. Political prisoners. You heard about that kind of stuff. It was for sure shot out the back door of the studio. There were guys in soldier uniforms and they had, I guess they were knives. A guy tied to something, not a chair, something else. It wasn't all made of bones, but some of it was. Only now I realize it wasn't torture so much, it was a ritual. I was damn glad I never saw that bone couch or whatever it was around there anywhere. Where they kept that thing, I hope I never know. I had seen some bad stuff by then in Iraq, but I got sick of this pretty quick and tried to shut it off. Only I couldn't get the VCR to quit. So I unplugged it from the wall and it still didn't stop. The pictures kept playing that I couldn't unsee and the sounds. So eventually I just backed up the ladder and pulled the ladder up behind me and shut the hatch, and I rolled one of those TV tripod camera things over the hatch. But I could hear the sounds coming up through the floor. And that blue flickering light from those old TVs showing around the cracks. Even when I went out into the lobby, those sounds were right under my feet. A man dying, evil men laughing, the scrape of bone, the whispers of knives. And that was messed up because that root cellar wasn't that big. It sure wasn't under the lobby, but I heard it just as clearly as when I was pushing that tripod over that hatch. Well, that was a long-ass night, and I couldn't wait until morning. Only, morning didn't come. It stayed dark, and I noticed my watch had stopped. So I'm not exactly sure how long that period of time was, but it was a long time. And the threads started coming loose. And I guess at some point I just fired my M16 into the darkness until I ran out of bullets. And that was a stupid thing to do, to run out of bullets when there are still voices and darkness. Because I knew that in that endless dark, I was going to need some weapons. What I thought I was going to do with those weapons, except for shoot at more shadows, I don't really know. But I was still a soldier then, first and foremost. I knew Chisholm and the other guys' guns were where they fell. Same with the 2 guys we killed. Plus, I thought I saw those rebels throw down some Chinese knockoffs of Mr. Kalashnikov's beautiful AK-47s when they were tearing ass away. And of course, there were knives and machetes and toenail clippers and everything else just lying around everywhere. The first step out that front door was the hardest, but those sounds and voices fell away, and that was something. And the dark wasn't too bad at first. I could see a bit and didn't have to feel around too much, which is good because when that hot wind blew a little bit your direction, it didn't smell good. You can figure out why. So I was doing okay, all things considered, getting my little armory together. But then Chisholm stepped out in front of me, right out of the darkness. For a crazy second, I thought somehow he'd survived that bullet, even though he still had a hole where his left eye should have been, and not much back of his forehead. He said a lot of stuff to me I won't repeat, mostly because he gave me a righteous ass chewing, which I deserved, but the one thing I will say is he told me a lot of blood had been spilled right there, and that something woke up. Something woke up. And that plays into what happened next. He was right. Of all the stupid things I did when we hit the LZ, leaving a bunch of dead guys laying around, showing no respect for the dead, especially my own dead. Man, I just remembered that other dude's name was Cord. So I thought I was going down Christmas Carol style when the second ghost stepped out from around the building. And it wasn't Cord, like you'd think. It was Don the Dragon Wilson. And he was not dead then and is actually not dead now either. So I think I was losing it a bit at that point, in case you couldn't guess. But I told the dragon to make more of those Blood Fist movies because I loved the first one, and he ended up making 6 or 7 more, so I gotta think what was real that night and what wasn't. That long night. He made a lot of those movies. I'm just saying, he made a lot of them. I went back down inside before I saw a third ghost. I'd killed 2 other guys who were just lying there, and there was a whole shelf full of videotapes. And where they put the pieces and parts of those victims from those tapes, I had no idea. I don't know if victim is the right word, but sacrifice. I don't know. It sounds like something you just give into. And I'll give it to those dudes. They went down fighting. Screaming, but they were fighting too. I was locked and loaded in that TV station, but those sounds kept coming out from under the studio, and there weren't enough guns and knives to chase that away. I started thinking, was I better off hiding out there in the TV station or taking my chances out in that darkness? That tells you how bad it was, where my head was at. It wasn't long after those thoughts I started hearing something I knew wasn't off that tape that wouldn't quit playing. I guess the right word would be, it was a murmur, a murmuring. Man, that's a funny word. Murmuring. It was almost like it was right in my skull, behind my eyes kind of thing. I'm not exactly sure, but I think it was a day or maybe 2 days later when I figured out what it wanted me to do. And it took me, I think, about another day to decide I was going to do it. So when I did, I tied a belt below my elbow and picked up the sharpest machete I could find. My first thought was I could just sacrifice a finger, maybe 2 fingers, but if it wasn't enough, if it wasn't satisfied, then I didn't know if I had the guts to swing that knife down a second time. That voice, if you could say it was a voice, was more than a murmur at this point. It was getting damned loud, in fact. So when I finally brought that machete down, I took the whole hand. Behind me, out of the TV, Richard Roundtree said, "Look, why don't you get rid of that jolly giant over there?" And then I passed out. When I woke, the sun was up. A big red sun. Never been happier to see one. There was blood everywhere, but just a little more inside me than outside me, and I learned it was just enough. I left everything. I didn't take a gun, or a machete, or a pocket knife, or a toothpick. I walked down off that hill and passed a whole army on the way, but whether they were more rebels or the government troops, I don't remember. I passed through them all like a ghost, and nobody even looked at me. I walked a long way, and finally, it was far enough away that everything I saw and heard was more or less behind me. And that country was coming apart at the seams, but neither man nor beast gave me a second look. Maybe I was the third ghost. I grabbed a KA-60 transport plane out of there and then caught a flight into Lagos. When I got back to the States, I got pretty drunk, and then I went down to Iowa where Chisholm was from. And if you think this story is unbelievable, you should have heard the story I told Chisholm's mother about how he died. More like how he lived and fought and killed 100 rebels. And before that, he personally made Saddam Hussein pee his pants and run away. Instead of telling her that we didn't do much in Desert Storm but drive around, and he was a merc for about 5 minutes before he got shot right in the head. And he just lay there dead until he got up and talked to me, and then he just laid there dead again, and I assume he got rolled down the hill into some mass grave or something. That whole place was a mass grave, and I don't doubt that that's why it doesn't exist anymore. Nobody around to remember that place or what it was called. After Iowa, I went back to Indiana and got a job selling cars. And man, if I thought I was around stone killers and crazy people before, this car selling business, it ain't for the weak. You know, for a minute I thought about getting a hook on this stump and maybe getting back into it, into the mercenary game. And then I was like, come on, man, a hook? Hey, do you want another drink? No? Hey, that's okay. I'm going to hang out a little while longer, maybe go to an after-hours joint after this. These guys at the VA let me know about a couple places, like this warehouse where at night, old guys are in the back playing records and they sell you beers out of a cooler, blankets over the windows, people there all night, dancing and dressed up and everything. It's crazy, man. But sometimes I need an all-night scene. Yeah, because there are nights... there are nights where... this stump aches and I hear those voices under my feet again. And blue lights flickering like TVs don't even make anymore, really. And the murmuring right in the back of my damn coconut head. And I just want to stay up, and make sure the sun comes up again in the morning. Just in case, Man, that one was a whole lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed narrating it. John wrote this one really thinking about how I read these, so he gave it a lot of mannerisms, a lot of character elements that made it a lot of fun for me to read. And I love the setting and the fact that it's about a situation, an extreme situation that can be made even more extreme by the unknown. So I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I enjoyed it. I also enjoy any time I get an opportunity to talk about Don the Dragon Wilson. And really, if you haven't seen Blood Fists 1 through 7, you should. They are great films, and they have no right to be good, by the way, because they basically use the same screenplay over and over. I really do think that Blood Fist 3, 4, and 5 are the same script as Part 1. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Real quick, I want to mention John Dalton has written so many screenplays, maybe about 60 or 70 screenplays that he's sold, and he's recently directed his second feature film, a little movie called Scarecrow County, which I actually just finished doing with him a little bit of a tour with, because I produced Scarecrow County. For those who don't know, my day job is making movies. Now, a lot of them are for the price of a used car, but they are movies nonetheless, and I am proud of them. And John's new one, Scarecrow County, we just sold it into distribution. We took it to Iowa City for a big screening that was really fun around Halloween time. We just premiered it in the Dayton, Ohio area, which is where I live, and people are digging it. His first directorial effort, which I produced, is called The Girl in the Crawl Space, and you can actually find that on Amazon to rent, or Vudu, or Fandango now, wherever you like to rent movies digitally. You can check out The Girl in the Crawl Space, written and directed by John Oak Dalton, the writer of this story, and produced and photographed by moi. So if you get a chance, check that out. John has actually already written another story to be read on the show. He's a bit of an overachiever, and we'll be bringing that to you in a couple of weeks. And we're going to try to make a weekly Spooky Original at least a once-a-month type deal, as we get to showcase some cool stories and prose. And when I'm done writing the screenplay that I have been working on for months and months, and I have to get done or die, I might even take a crack at writing some fresh, short prose, because it's fun. And that's kind of the best part, the best experience I'm having. The best part of the experience I'm having with Weekly Spooky is I'm really enjoying experiencing these stories and then sharing them and kind of expanding from there. It's a lot of fun for me. I don't want to talk forever about it, but I'll talk about it some more next week when we bring you some more spookiness. But I do want to also mention, we mentioned it last week as well, if you get a chance, go to Amazon Prime, and after you check out Girl in the Crawl Space, which you can rent, you can watch my new TV series, a TV series I produced and directed called Boggy Creek, the series. It's a Bigfoot-style X-Files style TV show. There are 6 episodes. It's ready to be binged, and give it a watch if you have an Amazon Prime account. It is free, no additional cost, so please just check that out. And as always, we are brought to you by my web store, henflix.com, which sells my movies and merchandise. We also have Weekly Spooky merchandise you can get at weeklyspooky.com, and we have a Patreon, which you can also find all of that information at weeklyspooky.com. But I don't want to sell you a bunch of stuff. All I really want to give you is a little uneasy feeling and those silly goosebumps. So I'm going to get out of here and catch you guys next week for a little bit of fear and terror. So for myself, for the lovely Dan Wilder, my producer, and for Ray Mattis, whose music is what is helping guide the goosebumps, we'll catch you next time right here on Weekly Spooky.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you're safe. Trust me.